is a profile on Dr. Henry Ponder, the president of Fisk University. And Dr. Ponder, before we had our first commercial break, we were talking about some of the things that are happening in Nashville. But let's recognize that very soon you will leave Nashville to go to Washington, D.C. as the head of a very, very important African-American higher education committee. And let's have you to give us some information about that committee, that title, and some of the things that are involved with that, and what are some of your plans? Just as we talked about how you saw Fisk when you came to Fisk many years ago, how do you see higher education, and what do you see as your priorities as the executive of this organization? Let's talk about it from that perspective.
Dr. Haney, I am going to take over as president of the National Association for Equal Opportunity in Higher Education. That is the umbrella organization for all of the 117 African-American colleges and universities in this country. In that position, I will be the spokesperson for all of these public, private, and community colleges in the country. One of the jobs will be that of lobbying for what is best, trying to influence policy for what is best for these institutions. But again, let me quickly add that what is good for these institutions is also good for all of higher education. So it's not a separate issue here. It's just that in this country, we do have a dichotomy of different kinds of institutions, liberal arts institutions, land-grant institutions, and this is just another segment of that. All of us are trying to do the same thing. So in that position, I will be trying to make sure that the states understand that these institutions must be funded at appropriate levels. So I will be doing some lobbying at state levels. I'll be doing some lobbying at the federal level. And I will also be working in tandem with all of the entities in Washington, the higher education agencies, trying to do better things for higher education. And the main thing that we will do is to try to make sure that we keep the federal government understanding its role in making sure that higher education prospers in this country.
And so the federal government has a very, very important role to play from your position, from your perspective as the president of this new organization.
There is no question about that, and what we have to do is to make sure the federal government understands that it still has a role in higher education. That isn't just for African-American higher education, that's all of higher education. For example, what the government has done to finance the land-grant schools in this country, all over, one in every state and two in the southern states, one African-American and one white. What it has done there has done more to increase the productivity of agriculture across the country for the lay farmers as well as those. They do all of this work on trained people who do the research at these land-grant institutions. Then they give it out free to the farmers, and then they can make 2 bushels of corn grow where but 1 grew before, all those kinds of things. Wheat is much better than it was. So the government played a role in that. The government played a role in making sure that we have the most intelligent populace of any country in the nation. We're about to lose that, and we're about to lose it because the government seems to be pulling away from its role in higher education. We must bring it back to understanding that it must continue to play that role.
You know, I think, Dr. Ponder, not long ago we had some people here from the health department, and we were talking about cost effectiveness and et cetera. And so are you saying that it is cost effective for the federal government to become involved in scholarships and in all other kinds of methods in terms of helping students who might not be able to help themselves? Is that the thrust of what we're saying?
There is no question about that. Let me take another example. Let's take the whole space program. The reason we have computers doing the kinds of things they're doing now, and small space but a lot of output, is because the federal government, through its NASA work, put money into research and development of these things so that we got a better product. Now, the spin-off of that is, once they did that, it made computers less expensive so that now colleges and universities can buy computers. Every individual in this country, almost, can have a laptop computer because of the price it is. The reason we have that is because of the government putting money into making sure that it happens. Now, my point is the government should continue that so that the whole populace of this country would be better off.
You know, Dr. Ponder, one of the things that I think that we find in higher education, but especially in elementary and secondary education today, is the tremendous dropout problems that we're having among our young people, in addition to violence and those kinds of things. Let's talk about it from that perspective and look at the impact that dropping out of school can have and is having on institutions of higher education.
Well, let me tell you, the dropout is hurting the whole nation. And I think we're coming around to understanding that this is a societal problem. It's not an ethnic or racial problem or a teenage problem or whatever. It is a societal problem, and therefore society has to do something to do it. Now, going back to the Stone Age, persons came together into communities because they knew that there was strength in groups rather than individuals. The reason we built forts in this country, I'm not defending it, I'm only saying the reason we built forts as we moved from east to west in this country was that it gave us the strength to bring all the people here, the soldiers and so forth. Then when persons decided to raid us, we had the strength to hold them off. Now, in a society where we have the problems that we talk about now, crime, drugs, teen pregnancy, what I'm saying is the government has a role to play to say to the society, the group of persons in Nashville, we have to get a group together who's going to work at this problem. Wherever the problem is, we got to get a group of persons to work with it. Government has a major role in helping to do that. What we tend to do now in government, and I hope we're changing that, is that we're treating the end results of the problem rather than trying to do something to prevent it. We're not doing any prevention on teen pregnancies. We're talking about cutting mothers off after they've had the second child. That's what you call the wrong-headed way to do it. What we ought to do is provide education for the youngsters' parents so that the youngsters don't follow the parents into that. If we put money into that, over a period of time, we wouldn't have to put as much money into welfare and other kinds of things. That's the way I think we ought to do it, and the government has a role to play in that.
It's one of those ideas of pay me now, or pay now, or pay later.
No question about it.
That we find not only in government, but all across the board. That's a general...
Now, if you look at that, if we can keep more persons in school so that they don't drop out, they don't become teen pregnancies, don't get into the crime scene, don't get into drugs and so forth, then our colleges and universities will have a larger pool of students from which to choose. Therefore, we will increase the number of persons who are going on to college education, finishing high school, going on to college education. Keep in mind, a requirement for going to college is graduation from high school.
Very good, and we'll talk about that after this second commercial break. We'll be back with you following this break.